Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're also on BitChute and YouTube. And I also have 4 other podcasts: The Awakening, to expose fraud and corruption, but with solutions; Meditation Podcast, to help you chill; Crypto Podcast, to learn about blockchain technology; and the Learn Polish Podcast, that does exactly what it says on the tin. I'm also a podcasting coach. You'll find everything on bio.link/podcaster. My guest today, strategist, speaker, author, executive coach, sales, management, and leadership consultant. Please welcome Jay Williams.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. I'll tell you this. I want to listen to some of your other podcasts. You definitely piqued my interest.
So, I mean, obviously I've mentioned a few things there, but you might just introduce yourself to the listeners.
Sure. So, my role is it started with an epiphany, is that in working with CEOs, they don't really want you to fix them. They want you to fix their people. And so I share that because with this epiphany, it's given me a focus on my audience. And my audience is not middle management. It's really about managing the middle. And so in my work, that's my audience. So if somebody's a new VP, if they're a new director, if they've been promoted based on their technical skills, because we all know the super worker becomes the supervisor, right? And all of a sudden, this lead engineer, this chemist, they now are tasked with a new job description. And so in my work, I work with those individuals either on a one-on-one basis or a group setting. And so there's work we do. When people talk about leadership, just a little bit of a caveat, I find that everything really boils down to communication. So as we talk today, I might use leadership and communication interchangeably because that's really where I spend my time, is on that communication piece. And so I work with leaders on how to listen and how to ask great questions. And I'll stop there and turn it back over to you.
So I know I want to kind of go into your kind of speaking journey as well, but I'm also curious the difference between a coach and a consultant.
This has been a rich conversation because I think if you serve in a leader capacity, so just really anyone who is influencing anyone else, so whether it's a leader of a project or it's a leader of people, I think there's multiple roles that you potentially could fall into. So I want to answer your question for the audience. When you talk about coach, you talk about consultant, you could add counselor into that as a leader, a critic, a cheerleader, certainly a mentor. And so specifically the difference, because I think you hear a lot of, there's been this evolution of people who've become coaches, right? And so from a definition standpoint, a coach is not a subject matter expert, whereas a consultant would be a subject matter expert. And so as a leader, as a subject matter expert, you would give people questions. As a coach, you ask questions. And really the primary difference, I think, with a coach is that you're helping people to discover what they already know. And as a consultant, people are asking you a question, you're giving them an answer. So if you're a leader listening in, you could probably relate to this. And you go, yeah, that's the role I have. My people come to me, they have a problem, I solve it. And so in the work I do, not only do I do this one-on-one work, is I show organizations and groups and leaders how to use this methodology to grow their people. And to the goal as a coach is really to have these questions, and they translate into leadership skills, because when you ask questions, it allows you to know what someone knows, what they think, and what they feel prior to you responding. How do they do with answering that one?
No, beautiful. Yeah, I love it. Love it.
Okay.
So, I mean, obviously you're doing a lot of speaking. So what's your actually journey? When Jay was a little boy, was he up the front of the class or was he hiding in the corner?
I gotta tell you, it's if you go way back, it's I don't know. I've run into some people, got reacquainted, right, through social media that you haven't seen for years. And someone said, yeah, even at a young age, you were kind of this way, the way that you communicated. So I can't answer it for you. People have said there's some similarities, but what happened was that I was in a leadership role. And what I found out, and some of the listeners might be able to relate, is I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. And so I looked at it and I just asked myself, well, what is it that you love or enjoy about what you do? And I enjoyed the conversation around being a more effective leader. And I enjoyed showing people how to do that. People shared back with me that not only did I model the behavior, but I had a way to share it in a very simple, understandable way. And so that's where I began to separate the two from being a leader to really being more of a speaker and more of a facilitator. And it happened actually quite by accident. In the organization I was in, they were asking me more and more, would you speak to this department? Would you speak to the group? And then someone outside said, hey, will you come and speak to us? And I said, sure. And they said, how much do you charge? So that's how I became a speaker. There's no well-planned strategy. And even when you go back, there wasn't things like podcasts and social media. So it was quite by accident that it happened. But what the driver was understanding what I enjoyed doing about my role, and then really eliminating the pieces that I didn't enjoy. And maybe, again, some of you can relate, and some of you won't be able to relate. I didn't enjoy being responsible for other people's performance.
No, I mean, when I was working in Ireland, I was working for a mechanical contractor doing a load of jobs. And I found, between foremen and engineers and everything, you were like an agony aunt at times to try to make sure that they were happy, that you'd get the best performance out of them. And then in Poland, I was doing a lot of real estate. And it kind of sucks the energy out of me because I'm a creative person. I love doing things. I like just driving on. And when I have to step back and be watching people, and I've talked to a lot of people, I think that's the one thing that most people actually hate.
Yeah, it's interesting because I alluded to it before, is that what happens in business, and you've had a diverse career, is the super worker becomes a supervisor. So you referenced your time in England. And so the person's on the construction site, or the engineer who's the best engineer, now gets promoted. It's a completely different skill set. And you mentioned being in sales, and being even in real estate. And I think you see within an office, the top salesperson now becomes the manager. And there's no correlation in the skill set. It's a completely different job description. In fact, I've seen the reverse happen in organizations where someone who's not a top performer for their technical skills is an exceptional leader and manager. And it makes sense because they're completely different skill sets. And so when you share that with me, I can relate to you in that situation. And I think organizations need to understand when they go to promote people that it is a different job description, and to have that conversation. Is this what you want to do? Because the reality is, a company is you lose your best engineer, and at best you gain a dynamically mediocre manager, and at worst an HR nightmare.
And they tend to, well, from my experience, what I've witnessed, they tend to just put them into the position and let them sink or swim, instead of actually training them properly before they put them into the position and making sure everybody is happy before they actually start taking the role. But from my experience, what I've seen, even with trade, if you had a plumber, they were making the plumber the foreman. And sometimes they didn't want that, but they were kind of pushed into it. It's like they felt, they had to take it, otherwise they might lose their job.
Yeah, I think when you look at an organizational chart, it was created by someone, I believe. I think there's multiple benefits. Let me just say that. One of the benefits that I hear from companies is that we can show growth, right? So if you look at our organizational chart, here's the opportunity. To your point, for that foreman, that person became a foreman, that may not be their idea of growing within the organization. So I'm working with a global engineering company. And when I work with the engineers, especially the ones that have been promoted into leadership, they want a more complex project. They want different technology. They are not looking to grow in the organization by managing other people. And so I think it becomes important to understand how whoever you're working with defines growth. Because for every company now, there's two things they're looking at: attraction and attrition. And I think that they're probably more proficient at attracting people. The challenge is the attrition and why they leave. And I think having some of these conversations about understanding how they define growth. And for some people, they want to be in leadership. They don't have the skill set. And to your point, they're just thrown into it. And what's the phrase in my book? I write a chapter: fake it versus facing it. However, the advice that's given is just fake it till you make it. There could be a lot of collateral damage that happens in the interim.
Oh, definitely. And like I've seen your YouTube channel, and to be honest, it's actually great advice that you're giving, and you do it in little kind of snippets, which is like a minute or so, which is fantastic. So like, because I mean, there's a lot of people, they're either in the position or they're dealing with it. But I suppose let's look at the kind of toxic side of it as well. Like, because you have to look at it on both sides. One, the employer that's trying to deal with people with this toxic in the thing, and the other is when the employer is abusive himself. He's the narcissist, let's say.
It's you bring up an interesting example. I was working with an organization for the last 6 months, and that was the situation. They were complaining about their culture and their people. And yesterday they asked me flat out, what piece of advice can you give me to fix it? I don't know how to do that. And respectfully, I share with them where I would start and where I'd invite them to start is what part do they play in triggering that response from their people? And I think today, whether we're talking about race relations, whether we're talking about identity choice, whether we're talking about religious, political choices, whether you get the vaccination, and we're seeing these responses from people, is that we have to ask ourselves, what part did we play in it? And part of it could have been by what we said, by what we asked. And I think as a leader in an organization today, it's interesting, the vocabulary's changed in business today. So the word trust got on the landscape probably about 12 years, probably longer than that, with Stephen Covey Jr. But by the way, as listeners always ask, what book would you recommend? And I want to be sensitive. It depends on where you are in your life. One book unequivocally that's resonated with me through the years that I keep right within arm's reach and I reference is The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey Jr. So shameless plug there. I don't get any money off of that, but shameless plug. But in any event, so trust was introduced into this vocabulary in business. And then probably about 7 months ago, you heard empathy, the number one skill that leaders are missing today. So now you have trust and you have empathy. And then Marcus Buckingham, who's highly regarded researcher with the Gallup poll, wrote a book called Love and Work. So now we have this vocabulary in the workforce that's trust, right? That's empathy, that's love. It's words we haven't heard before. And I think as a leader that people are bridging the gap between my outside life and my work life. And there's a human element that we can no longer suppress. And then as a leader, you're going to have to engage in these conversations. You're going to have to be sensitive to where people are at. You're going to have to listen. You're going to have to understand. Most importantly, you're going to have to communicate when you communicate with them from their perspective. And the only way you could do that, and that's where my methodology foundationally starts with, is with listening and asking questions, listening and asking questions, because that will give you the information to know, what they think, and what they feel, that allows you to communicate from their perspective. So I felt as though I gave you a long-winded answer. I hope I came around to answering your question.
No, definitely. And this is probably opening a can of worms now, but I think it's probably relevant to the time we're in. But I'm seeing a load of the gender issue, which is coming in now, which there's people saying, they're putting he, she, they after their name, and you have to say a certain way. So there must be a load of things happening in a company when you're insulting somebody but without even realizing it, and how you overcome this.
Yeah, it's, first of all, I you articulated it well, is I don't think it's anyone's intention to insult the other person. So generic advice, if there's a disconnect, and I work with conflict resolution and mediation within organizations, is I ask people this: what do you think their intention was? And quite often people will share back, well, I don't think their intention was to insult me. I don't think their intention was to exclude me. And so that's a great place to start. And if you're listening and you've been offended, or there is a disconnect around this gender identity topic, if you'll consider the person's intention, and that's not the type of person they are, give them a little bit of margin of error there. For the other people that you're hearing that this is important to people, I I recently got feedback, and it was after a group session, and someone shared, we enjoyed the content. I would encourage you to be sensitive to how people want to be referenced as far as gender. And so for the listening audience, I'm still learning this. This is new. One of the things that has helped me is that initially there's some judgment, right? So for those of you who are listening, I'm not 20 and I'm not 70, okay? I'm somewhere in between. We'll just leave it at that. That was not something that I grew up with. And so it's not something that's on the forefront of my mind. And I definitely have a perspective about it. And here's the filter: is for me in the work I do, am I here to judge or am I here to help? And I think as a leader, it's important to have a filter when you communicate. And so with the gender identity, I'm not here to judge whether that's important to you, whether it's right, how imperative it is to our relationship. I'm here to help. And if I'm here to help, and that's something that will help us along in the project, in our relationship, in building trust, then I would ask the person, just know that it's a mistake of the mind and not the heart. And so for anyone who's listening, I'm still figuring this out myself, because it is something that's at the forefront. I think for anybody who's listening that it's important to you, just realize, for those of us who are not as conscious of it as you like us to be, it's a mistake of the mind. It's not a mistake of the heart. And like you, we're factoring in people's heightened awareness of their political beliefs, of their work choices, whether they stay at home, they work remotely, of their vaccination choices, of their identity choices. So like you, we're balancing all these things, and just a little bit of margin of error. That's all. So it's not direct advice, bear with me. It's something that I'm working through as well.
And when, like, say, if you go into an organization, is there times that you could have a workshop with, say, employees and kind of work with them?
Yeah, so the three audiences that primarily I work with is, one, senior leadership. And so there's, for those of you who are listening or you have an organization, you can relate to this. As you move up in the organization, I think your priorities and how you want to spend your time changes. And so your audience may be other senior executives, it may be the board, it may be your primary clients. And my experience is that very few of these senior leaders want to groom their VPs and their directors. And by the way, I don't fault you for that. It's a different skill set. And so I will work with them from a strategic standpoint and a one-on-one standpoint, or if there's a pinch point in their communication. So that would be with senior leadership. As you get to the middle of the organization, here's an analogy for anybody who's listening, is that if you went to work out, and even if you don't work out, I think everybody gets the concept of it, you would quickly realize that any trainer, anything you listen to online, would tell you want to start with your core, because the core supports the entire body, both what's below it and what's up above it. And so the correlation, the analogy there is, in an organization, if you can build a strong middle, they can support leadership and they can also support the people that they lead. And so I work with those groups in a workshop format. And so over the last 30 months, as you can imagine, I do a tremendous amount of Zoom workshops. So the largest numbers that I will do, that's not my preference, is 34 has been the largest. And I've managed expectations with them. For anyone who's listening, the larger the number of attendees, the less the engagement. The lower the number of attendees, the higher. So from a format standpoint, the workshops that we workshop through are generally 8 people at max. And that just has to do with science and studies and engagement and how people learn. I will share with the listeners, and they may be able to resonate with this, is that my experience is that people have access to knowledge, and through people like yourself, who I think it's brilliant with the podcast, and then you have 4 of them, or through YouTube, they have access to the knowledge. I will share information with them and methodology. What I'm finding is the opportunities to bridge the gap between knowing and doing. And I think anybody's listening, they've shared with your people, they go, I know. And your question is, why don't you do it, right? So that's the work that I really do. And that's where the numbers come into play. And so I've also found that people enjoy leader-led learning, meaning coming from themselves. And they also enjoy this peer-to-peer interaction. So as a long-winded answer, the audience would be the leaders, the senior executives, and definitely smaller groups. And then in the middle, any of the groups in any of your departments that you have people in, those are the groups that I work with. And then I work with, if you have an internship program, we work with organizations around their interns, because it's a way to expedite their ramping up into the organization.
What's your thoughts on having interns? Because I think there's a bit of abuse going on there. I saw it even in Ireland, they started doing it where I think they get them for a year or something like that without paying them. And it's like, if you're getting the experience, I get it. But sometimes they're getting people to come in doing the photocopying and doing mundane tasks that they're not really leaving with a skill set. But I think when a company is making decent profit, they can give a minimum wage at least. I don't think it's fair that people are actually working for nothing.
I don't believe in the concept of free. So for anyone who's listening, please take this within the context of our conversation. And even to that point, I don't do work for free. I think there's you need to have skin in the game. I really do. And currency is a tangible piece of showing your commitment level. And I think for an organization to their people, and for people who are paying people like you and I to come in and work, I have friends. I'm having a back door put in, and my friend has a company. He said, I can help you with that. And I said, no, I want to pay you. And the reason is, whether it's company to employee or me to my friend, I want to be able to hold you accountable. And so I don't want to upset the apple cart for any organization that's out there. I think there's a human standpoint to what we do. And everything I do, I want to make sure there's a compelling human case and a business case. And they're not mutually exclusive to me. And I think in business today, when you extract humanity, you're extracting from the potential that exists there. So pay people. They need food, water, shelter, just like I do. So that's one reason. I think the other reason is that for them, now that they're getting paid, hopefully there's some level of work ethic that if I'm receiving a paycheck, I should do some work. I think you can hold them accountable now to, I am paying you for a task to be done. So that's my thinking. And for me, when people pay, that's showing me a level of commitment to the process. And I think for people who've done podcasts or done free education, over the last 30 months, I think a touch point with the community or the world was, let me offer free content, right? I think we can all relate to that. And what happens is some people show up and some don't. Unfortunately, the downside to it is that when people went back to charging for education, we had now hit reset. People go, I can get it for free. So I just throw up on you, a lot of thoughts. I just don't see how free, as it relates to a work scenario, benefits the employee and it benefits the employer. I think that we want to leave people in a better place than we found them, and that's your general philosophy. Then let me pay you, and let me teach you new skills. So to your point, if they have them running copies, well, first of all, hopefully the new generation knows what a copier is. So that's the first thing. So you might be teaching them something. But in any event, is from a human standpoint, am I elevating their skill set? Am I contributing to their success? Are you teaching them tasks that will make them employable to the world at large? I don't know what the laws are from country to country. There was a law within the United States that in order to qualify for an internship, an unpaid internship, it had to be a skill set that they didn't have. So I kind of like the thinking behind that.
Mhm. And you
How well did I
mentioned,
answer that
no,
question?
perfect. And you mentioned
Okay.
about your friend with the door, and it's just something I'm conscious as well, because for people that are listening, because if you have a trade, especially say the plumber or the electrician or the carpenter, all the cousins and everybody, they expect them to do it for nothing. They're working hard. That's a hard job. And then they expect them to do it, and they're not really the same with a mechanic. And I know doctors as well. They constantly have people contacting them and they're not paying them. And it's just something that you should always respect. But like, don't let other people, if you're one of these tradespeople, don't let them to use you either, because you have to value people's time and money.
If you're, to your point, if you're a tradesperson, and I'm not minimizing that skill set, it just seems to be the one, but you mentioned a doctor too, or a friendship. The greatest way I think to show respect to that friendship is to pay them. But I tell my friends, I want to hold you accountable. And if you're not charging me, I can't do that. So allow me to do that. And, yeah, I love that. So if you're a tradesperson or you have a family member, you're a doctor or a lawyer, tell people, I don't want to rob you of the satisfaction of holding me accountable. Here's how we could do it. Pay me to do it.
Exactly. So your book, I think, is it this versus that? You might tell me what it's about and what's included in it.
Well, the book was really, it was my second book. And the reason I mentioned that, not in a boastful way, they were written two different ways. And there's about a 5-year gap in between the two books. And the first book was Leave Your Mark, because I wrote it because I think everybody wants something to show for their time spent in an engagement or in a relationship or even in a conversation. That book was really me getting out all my thoughts, that I had. And it wasn't so much about editing down the book. The second book, what changed was when I was doing research on human beings' attention spans, and you alluded earlier. Thank you for going to the YouTube channel, by the way. I appreciate that. That was the result of that, is that they're 1 minute, because human beings' attention spans have shrunk dramatically. And the most recent study was done by Microsoft. They say human beings' attention spans shrunk to 8 seconds. Now, this part was really, really funny to me. They said a goldfish attention span's 9 seconds. So I don't know how they measured the two. But in any event, the new book is written in the filters where that it's clear, concise, and compelling. The audience will determine whether or not it's compelling. So each chapter was this versus that. So IQ versus EQ, management versus leadership, hubris versus humility. There's 24 chapters of this versus that. They were designed and edited to be read in really close to 4 minutes or so. Because again, and I started the book off this way, my point of difference won't be knowledge. I mean, the reality is you could Google anything in that book and find it online. If I had a gift for the reader or the audience, it was to give them new, different, or deeper thinking. And that was the goal of the book, was to open up a discussion. And so as an example, I think for the audience, last 30 months that we've gotten innovative in how we communicate, how we do business. And so because things weren't in person, the way that I engage in companies is they would take the book and they would read a chapter, again, 4 or 5 minutes. They get time to process and to think about it. Then organizations and group of 8 we would have one 90-minute call. And the idea is that you had time to process the information. So the first chapter is on trust. So just to give the audience, and there's only trust and no trust. So that was the this versus that piece. And as you had a chance to process, you look at where could we use that in the organization? Where are we missing that? And so we get in a group with this peer-to-peer learning, and my role changed. Is really become a facilitator of conversation in that. And so for 90 minutes, we talk about that. And then the participants would get a half-hour one-on-one time with me, scheduled during the week, to talk about something that was either personal to them, or there was some privacy that was related to the topic. And that's how we worked together, was navigating through that. And that was the idea of the book, is that I actually updated the book this past month, and people who acquire the book after this, with 3 questions to continue the conversation, either for yourself or with others. But the book was designed really to push your thinking, and then to be a conversation starter, that you could sit down with someone in your organization. Hey, will you read this chapter? And then I'd love to get your thoughts on conversation versus confrontation. But what a great conversation starter for someone who loves conflict, right?
Excellent. And have you done an audio version of the book?
I gotta tell you something funny, and maybe you can relate to this. You ever do something and ask the audience for feedback, and then you do it, and then they don't participate or take advantage of it? So on the first book, I did the audio. And for anybody who's listening, and I think you can relate, doing an audio for a book is draining. It is really, because it's not a stream of consciousness, you're reading it. So I get through it. And it's not the numbers of the people who requested audio, or not the numbers of people who bought it. So for the second book, the answer is no, there's not an audio, but it doesn't mean, a lot of things have evolved in technology in the last 2 years that will make it accessible. So there is an audio for the first book, Leave Your Mark. And these are available on Amazon, by the way. For those of you who have a level of interest, the book is available, both Leave Your Mark and This Versus That on Amazon. 100% of the profits go towards human trafficking. And well, let me rephrase that. They don't go towards human trafficking. I'm sorry. They go towards stopping human trafficking.
You're the problem.
I'm the problem. Yes. Wow. No, it's doing fine, unfortunately, by itself. So that's something that just resonates personally. Yeah. So for anyone, that's where 100% of the profits go towards that. So there is an audio version which you can get on Amazon as well.
Excellent. And I wasn't kind of going down that road, but I've covered human trafficking on my Awakening podcast. So I'm just curious, obviously a bit, because I think the amount of people, I think the best kind of analogy, what happened is, with a friend of mine, I with the research I was doing on different things, I kind of stayed away from it. And he made the comment that, by looking away, you're actually part of the problem as well. And since that, I kind of said, okay, I need to start exposing this and really letting people know. And it is so worse than I could have even imagined. There's millions that are going. So I just, how you it became your kind of passion to help that.
Here's a very specific scenario, is that as a church, I'm a faith-based guy, and went to church, going to listen to everything. They have a guest speaker talk about human trafficking. And not that I care any less for any of the listeners, but I think you can relate to it. I thought that was somewhere else. I thought it was in some third world country. And so I live outside of Philadelphia, and there's a lot of farmland. I mean, we have a major city. It's the 5th largest city, or may drop to the 6th largest city. So it's not like we're really far removed, but it's not something that I was hearing about every day. And so as the speaker was winding up, he said, this is happening right here in Bucks County. And I was shocked. And so, you know, I didn't want to talk to my boys or to talk to someone or to hear about it again. And anyone to ever said, well, what'd you do about it when you heard it about it? And that's probably one of the things that would be most soul wrenching for race relations, for human trafficking, any of these human things, is that when you talked about it, if somebody ever asked you, well, what'd you do? And so I, made a commitment, intentional giving, meaning that I give every month to this, regardless of whether there's book sales or not. And so that wasn't my own thinking, by the way, that somebody else triggered my thinking, is that you can do spontaneous giving or intentional planned out. And again, please, as you're listening, this doesn't elevate my status as a human being. It wasn't any of my original thinking. I just heard it and it made sense. And so we've been intentional about 5 years. One of the things that was shared when I was listening to about how you give is you don't need to give to everything, because you feel guilty when something comes in for leukemia or cancer. Just find the things that resonate with you. And so these things do. There's 3 organizations that we've allocated that we give to on a monthly basis. And I don't know that I'm changing the world as it relates to human trafficking. However, I think a bunch of crumbs make a cake. And so if there's an alignment with the book, if there's alignment with money, the time we donate to the organizations, the stores that they run, then I just feel as though that somehow I'm contributing to minimizing what's going on. And like you said, and this does not minimize it. There's different types of human trafficking that are going on. And, we often associate sex to it, but there's work human trafficking where people are enslaving people. And so I don't want to take the audience, I realize the sensitivity of it. So I don't want to take you a place you don't go. To your point, though, that was the trigger to me, to your question. And I was just surprised it was happening right in my backyard. Where we're situated, the way that the infrastructure is for the roads, it makes it very easy to traffic people. And so it was the infrastructure that really triggered us being a main thoroughway in the United States for that.
I think it's like, as you mentioned, we can't kind of be supporting everything, but definitely it makes a difference, because people, they need the funds, obviously, because it's like we've been talking earlier, like when people are doing work, sometimes people expect them to do voluntary work and everything, but once they've got the proper funding, they can actually do the proper research and save children from this. So every penny basically helps, and the fact that you're giving them 100% of the profits as well, I commend you on it. So it's fantastic.
Well, thank you. I just want to give the audience an example. And so one of the organizations that we donate to, they shared this story, just so that like where it goes, is they're on the border in Mexico. And so these group of people actually have a place that's just a couple of miles away. And they would get word of people who were, through the network, who were crossing over. And so they would go to a local rent-a-car place and rent a car and go to the border to try to grab these people that they'd heard through word of mouth or connections that were coming across before the human traffickers got them. Well, they began to recognize the rental cars. So some of the money that we donated went to buying them a van. Like some of the things you and I would never, like, where's this money going? Yeah. And so there's some people in very creative ways are donating their time and risking their life to help people. And so for anyone who's listening, some people, your gift is making money. By the way, I wouldn't minimize your gift. Some people have the gift of time, right? Some people have the gift of lack of fear. So for anybody who's listening, please don't minimize if your contribution is money. Know that it does make a difference. And it's a combination of your gift of money and somebody's gift of time, someone's gift of lack of fear, that make these things happen.
And I think when you have a mission that you're passionate about, it fuels you as well. It becomes more about, not about you anymore in life, that you have a bigger mission in life, and life becomes better knowing that you're helping others and making the world become a better place.
Amen, brother. Amen.
So, like, just before we kind of wrap up, because I'd like to just kind of bring it, like, you've got a beautiful background. So, like, when you're doing Zoom calls, are you doing it on that? Because it's really professional looking, you know, like for those just listening, there's a beautiful painting in the background, there's a bookshelf, and it looks really, really good.
Well, let me give a shameless plug. So the picture that you see back here is, I believe it's Big Canvas or bigcanvasart.com. And for anyone who's looking for accessible artwork that has an elevated taste level, that's still, again, accessible financially, this company is great. They offer all different sizes. And so it was an easy way to cover a lot of space, and certainly financially, I like to say humanly priced. Let's put it that way, okay? That everyone. So again, bigcanvasart.com or bigcanvas.com, but check them out. You will thank me. I need to get some endorsements, don't you think?
Oh, definitely. Like, you know,
I did book and art.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah. But it's got a very positive vibe from it, because even prior to
Oh,
recording, I
good.
was kind of, you know, it just caught my attention. I was like, oh, that's really beautiful. Like,
Oh, good. I appreciate that, because it's a very art's very, very subjective. So good. I'm glad it served its purpose there.
so just finally, because I always like to ask, you know, whether just the speaking or kind of the consulting or the coaching, the social media, because, you know, I mentioned YouTube. I mean, for me, my Polish channel does fantastic. My speaking channel on the YouTube, it's like, yeah, it barely trickles everything. And there's so many different platforms. So what's your kind of go-to one? What's your kind of advice on the social media minefield?
Can I give another shameless plug? And I swear to the listeners, I don't, first of all,
He's
let me
got
tell
3
you this,
affiliate links, basically.
I know I have, yeah, please use these 3 affiliates. Well, I only share it with you because this company, I've definitely connected them with so many people. And they said, we want to give you an affiliate link. And I said, please don't, because I don't want it to taint the recommendation for people. I want them to know it's 100% authentic. And in return, I hope people recommend me. So I hope it goes both ways. Without any thought of return, by the way, financial return. But this company is called Repurpose House. And I stumbled across them. And for anyone who's listening, whether you're, I've done them for individual contributors like myself, but also larger organizations. And it's called repurposehouse.com. And in addition to the people just being really cool and really smart, and really great to work with, they take your existing content, which is a new concept, because for people like us, we're always thinking we have to create new content. And we're thinking, we spend all this money to create this content that's not being used. So they will actually take any of your podcasts, they'll take your book, they'll take conversations, anything you have. I just send it to them, and they cultivate and create new content. So for anybody who's looking, you mentioned YouTube, that's the #1 search engine now. So if people are listening, TikTok is a close #2, right? I think for people like you and I who are not looking to sell people, but engage people and also give and share information, LinkedIn. This repurposehouse.com has done a lot to, one, educate me, and then also to repurpose what I have already, and to cut it up, because you guys know, for anyone who's going through social media, it's too hard to keep up with the algorithms and all those things. So yeah, I do want to give a shout out to them, and I'm grateful to them, and the interaction's been great, and the response has been great, and they've really done something that I can't do. And for anyone who's an entrepreneur who's listening, one of the hard lessons for me was, I think, we often bootstrap things for the understandable reasons, like yourself. I mean, I think you named 6 businesses you had. So, create funding for each of those is hard. Is that, something can be faster, better, cheaper, right? And we usually wind up with 2 of the 3. Sometimes you just have to flat out pay for things. And in hindsight, there's some things that I lost momentum and I lost opportunity because I didn't pay for it. And this is one of the things I've certainly gotten a return on my investment from. So that's a long-winded answer. How well did I answer your question?
Excellent. No, and
Okay.
all the questions, thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Fantastic.
Okay.
So, but the best plug now that I want you to do, because you're without affiliate links, you're plugging everybody, but I want to plug you now. Where can people find you?
If you're interested in just connecting at any level, wherever you're located in the world, you can go to jaywilliamsco.com. JAYWilliamsco.com. So jaywilliamsco.com. And I respond to all my messages within 24 hours. And it's just always something that's been important to me. So there's a contact page on there. And if you want to just take the liberty of scheduling a call just to connect, we can do that as well. And that's really the best way. And I can't tell you how I can help you because I don't know what your needs are. If it's centered around, if you're in business and there's the product, the process, and the people, the wild card I found is generally the people. And that's the lane that I stay in. And so whether it's working one-on-one, if there's listeners that you have a highly technically skilled staff, you have chemists, you have doctors, you have engineers, just as an example. You may have tradespeople that are highly talented, highly coveted, even by your organization. And there's things within their communication style that are causing a pinch point in the project, in the organization. They're causing an HR nightmare. People retain me to work with those people one-on-one or in their groups. And so if it's a people-related communication, I'd love to have that conversation with you. You can also, if you go on the channel, there's a Q&A. I'm sorry, channel. I'm mixing up my social medias. On the website, there's a Q&A there. And what I've done is I take in questions and then I respond in video. And my goal is to do it within a minute or less. So if there's a question that you want to submit, my commitment to you is I will respond, and I will respond in video and share that back with you.
Excellent. And I'll make sure I'll put the link both on the audio and the video, and I encourage people as well to check up your YouTube channel because I thoroughly enjoyed it. And as you say, it's like a minute, but very good answers. So thank you very much for the conversation.
I so enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, that's all for the Speaking Podcast. You'll find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. As mentioned, we're on BitChute and YouTube. Find the links in the podcast description. And my other 4 podcasts and my coaching, you'll find on bio.link/podcaster. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, share with your friends. Until next week, take care.